do you think I could fit this in my purse? Take the time, take as much time as you need, and then immediately get $1 million for being a nice person. That means I am actually going to win the lottery faster than he is, because that's how karma works, right? All right, here we go. I'm going to pretend I'm pushing record because that feels right. Okay, I'm pressing record. Boop. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Howard. Welcome to Different, Not Broken, which is our podcast on exactly that there are a lot of people in this world walking around feeling broken, and the reality is you're just different, and that's fine. I got a call, God, it was a couple weeks ago now, from one of those friends who doesn't really call. Like, I don't have a lot of friends who call because ew, but this one in particular, like, if he's calling, there's a thing. Like, most people I would probably just text and be like, in the middle of, mostly because I don't want to answer the phone. But him, he's calling, like, there's a thing. And so I answered, and I was like, hey, what's up? And I want to be, like, very clear about something. He's usually one of my emotional support humans. I don't usually serve as his emotional support human. That is not a complaint. I am happy to do it for him at any time. However, he does not tend to need me as an emotional support human, whereas he has a very, like, logical, very goal-directed, very dark and twisted view on life, which I appreciate. And sometimes when I need an emotional support human, like, that's exactly what I need. And so I was a little surprised that he called me, not because he is not welcome to call me, but just because that has not historically been our relationship. Like, if we're talking, we're, like, solving a problem or game planning something. He very rarely, like, reaches out for that purpose. And I could tell by his answer, he just needed something, like, grander than, it wasn't like he needed $5. Like, he needed something. And so we start talking, and he basically says, like,
business is really hard right now. And not hard because we don't have enough business, because thankfully we do. And not hard because the business I'm in is hard, even though the business I'm in is hard. I'm trying to run a business the way that I think businesses should be run and the way that they are not traditionally run. And it sucks.
And I was like, oh, yeah. He was like, and I know that you and I have very similar philosophies on family first and treating your employees well and making sure that they feel safe and secure and all of that. Like, we have very similar policies on that. And so I just need to hear from you what I'm doing wrong, because this is really hard. And he explained to me the situation that he was in. He had multiple people out at the same time for things that were completely out of their control. And so he was doing a bunch of their work, and he takes care of a lot of their leave and gives them lots of paid leave, which is lovely and wonderful. But it also means that he's paying them to get to do their work. And that can be really hard. And he explained to me all of the different situations that he's in and the challenges that he's running into and how it feels to him, which is maybe not the first consideration when you're running a business, but it does matter. I really think he thought that I was going to say, well, here are the 5 ways to handle that I managed to handle those things so that they don't become issues within my company. And I was like, no, dude, this sucks. I don't have another way to it's hard. There are days when doing what's right by the humans who are in front of you is really hard because it's expensive and it's time-consuming and it puts a lot of work on, in essence, the boss, because who else is going to pick up that slack, especially when the people who are supposed to pick up the slack can't pick up the slack because they too have a thing. And sometimes it's a confluence of so many things at once that you feel like you're drowning because you can't predict when the universe is going to do something like this. But also, if you're going to give the freedom and flexibility to your people, you have to give it to all of your people. And you can't hire extraneous people just to have people around, just in the event that it doesn't work. You're running a lean business because you're trying to run a business that prioritizes your employees, which means that you don't have people who aren't busy all the time. You can't afford it. But also, what do you do when you're in one of those situations? And I was like, yeah, it sucks. Like, I didn't have anything more intelligent to say. I just said, listen, if this were the easy way to do business, everybody would do it that way. If this were the way to do business, if this were the way that every business could survive without any kind of difficulty, then everybody would do it. We know we're doing things the hard way. We know when we make this choice, we know this is the hard way. And you don't realize how hard it is. You don't realize how hard it is until someone has been out of the office, and this has happened to me, until somebody has been out of the office for week 7 of what was supposed to be a 1-week sick leave. But that's out of their control because they're really sick. This happened to me 6 months ago. And you're picking up the slack because you're not going to go to this really sick person and say, I need you back. And you're not going to replace them. You're not going to fire them when they're dealing with this personal tragedy. And you can't pay somebody twice because as a business, you can't afford it. So it just has to suck. And I wish there was a better answer, but there's just not. It just has to suck because there are only so many answers to this problem, and you've already been through all of them. But the fundamental is there are humans in front of you who need things. And sometimes those needs have to come before the other important business things. But what I said to him is that this is temporary. Right now, in this moment, while you're waiting for this person to come back from leave, and you're waiting for this person to deal with this personal tragedy, and you're waiting for this, and you're looking for this, it's really hard. There's no way around it. It's really hard. And we did discuss a couple of strategies that you can use. You know, there are some states that the cost of leave doesn't fall on the employer because they have state-run programs. So we were talking about, like, what if you just hire in those states for the time being until you hit a place where you have the bigger policy that does it unilaterally regardless of what state we're in. So there were some like mitigation strategies of ways that you can avoid paying payroll for people who are not working through really good policies and state-funded programs that make it possible. So in that case, nobody gets screwed. Nobody's getting screwed. The business isn't getting screwed by paying for people who aren't working, and the person isn't getting screwed by losing access to their funding. Like, that's a win-win. Now, it's not a win-win for people who don't live in those states. But like sometimes we just have to make rules that support the business supporting their people, right? And that's one of the ways that you do it. So we did talk about some of those strategies. But I reminded him, like, this part is temporary. It sucks. It's awful. Getting up and going into work when you know that you have to do the job of 4 people and for an indeterminate amount of time because there are things out there in the universe that you have no control over that are happening, that sucks. But that's the temporary effect. The long-term effect is that you're going to have loyal employees. You're going to have employees who pick up the slack for you when you can't pick it up for yourself, which is going to happen eventually. You are going to know the limits to your policies and what is a reasonable, compassionate limit and what is maybe too much for the environment that you're in. And you are also going to realize what you need. What does this business need to survive? When we're working on very limited resources, what does this business need to survive? But you don't get that information without surviving the suck. If this were easy, everybody would do it. If running your business this way were the cheap way to do it, were the less labor-intensive way to do it, every company would do it and you wouldn't be remarkable for doing it. And mind you, like, the stuff that he's doing is like, and this is not to denigrate him, the stuff that he's doing is like the bare minimum for humanity. We're not talking about like giving people 5 years paid maternity leave. He's giving them the human responses that humans need. And that somehow has become like wildly revolutionary, which it is not. But like, good for him for doing it. Good for you if you decide you're going to do that and you stick with it. That's amazing. But also, like, we're not talking about free cars and rent paid just for existing. Like, we're talking about a job that like accommodates your humanity. Shocker. So I just kept reminding him, like, this is temporary. And I have to remind myself that all the time. This is temporary. I used to have a sticky note that sat on my computer that said, this is temporary, every time we went through another rough patch, because I needed the constant reminder that this is temporary. This is not forever. And I promised him that when he got to the other side of it, there would be a reward there. I don't know when the other side is, and I don't know what the reward is, but it's there. I promise you it's there. And I said, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, I don't know. But you will sense some sort of cosmic reward for this. He went through a bunch of stuff and he called me again, like maybe a week or two ago. And he was like,
all right, I gotta tell you something.
I was like, oh God, what did I do now? And he said,
the person who was out on leave came back. The other person who had to take an unexpected leave is now my chief operating officer and is handling most of the day-to-day stuff so I can do the other stuff that needs to be done. I hired somebody part-time to fill a small gap that no matter how many people we had, we wouldn't be able to fill. And our workplace culture, which has always been good, is better than ever.
and I was like, so you got through the suck? And he was like,
We got through the suck.
and I was like, and it was really hard and felt impossible? And he goes,
And it was really hard and felt impossible.
and I was like, and now you see why you do it? And he was like, I see it.
Like, I did make some policy changes. I brought in, I sprung for a disability policy that we didn't have before that is expensive out of pocket, but is cheap at the price if somebody needs it.
And I was like, exactly. Yes. So, but he was like,
But I see it now. I see it.
and this is not at all about being right, but this is one of the things that I talk about all the time. It's one of the reasons why I give people tons of my time that I truly make no money on, and why I talk about some of the things I do constantly, and why I encourage people to do what we do in any number of our businesses, because nothing I do, well, not nothing, but most of what I do is not proprietary. We need more people in the world doing good work, not less. And so figuring out how to get more of us out into the world is the way to do it. But you're never going to be in a situation where you do something really, really cool or kind or compassionate or put yourself out for somebody and then the next day win the lottery. Like, that's not how it works. But you will do all of those little tiny pockets. And this wasn't even a tiny pocket. This was a pretty big pocket. You will do all of those kind of pockets of good things for people, caring about people, finding ways to support people, finding ways to boost people up. And you don't ever know when you're on the other side. Like, it's not like there's a sign. There's not a road sign that says other. You just get there when you get there. But you find out that, oh, okay, there was a reason we did this. We did this hard thing for a reason. There was justification for it. And when you get the justification, you always know what it is. You know that this is the universe balancing itself out. I said this before. We had an employee who was gone with no contact for a really long time, or very little contact. And business says the right thing to do was text her, call her, send our person who runs HR after her to figure out when she was coming back, to put her on documentation so that if she was going to be out, she could, that's what business says. That's how business says you're supposed to deal with it, right? I was not going to bother this person when I knew she was going through maybe the hardest thing she had ever been through in her life. And that was just a choice I made. And so people kept asking me when she was coming back. And I was like, I don't know. And our HR person asked if she should keep running payroll for her. And I was like, yep. And she's, but she's not working. I know. And the only communication I had with her, and this is not a brag, this is just explaining what this looked like in real time when you are making these very human-centered decisions. This is not a brag at all, because I was committed to doing it this way, and I was absolutely going to do it this way, but there's always a part in the back of your brain going, this is not how you're supposed to do things, right? This is not how you run a quote-unquote business. Well, this is how I choose to run my business, so shove it, voice in the back of my head. But the only communication she got from me during that time period was just making sure you know that we've got everything here. Don't worry about your job. It'll be here when you get back. When she did call me, she finally called me several weeks in, maybe 2 weeks in, and told me like the whole depth of, basically they thought it was a stomach ache and it turned out to be very much not a stomach ache. And she told me the whole depths of that. I asked her for her address and I sent her fuzzy socks and a blanket and one of those like hospital type tables that you can get that like raise up and down and slide over your bed. I don't care how old you are. Everybody should have one. They're amazing. I have one. And I was like, oh, well, you definitely need one. And nobody has those in their houses. And the ones for the actual hospital are like $1,000. Don't buy those. Even though if somebody wants to gift me one, I'll happily take one because they're amazing. I was just messing with one at my mom's hospital room. And I was like, do you think I could fit this in my purse? But I sent her one of those. And she was very appreciative. And she, sent me a bunch of text messages. But I truly didn't care if I didn't hear from her. As long as I knew she was okay, as long as she was getting the care she needed, whatever, I didn't care. She finally came back to work, I want to say like 6 or 7 weeks later. And I said to her, like, I don't want you to come back on my account. You come back when you're ready. Meanwhile, I'll be very honest, I was drowning in her work because we only have one of her. And the only person who is not her that does what she does is me. So I was completely drowning in her work. I was trying to do certain things, trying to respond to certain things, like a little bit out of my depth because when you don't do the applications and submissions yourself, it's a little bit hard to figure out where everything is and where all the paperwork is. But I figured it out. And she came back to work 6 or 7 weeks later. And I basically said, whatever you need, wherever you need it, however you need it. If you need to take time off, if you need to work part-time, whatever, just let me know. And she's a worker. She wants to be working. So it wasn't like, no amount of me telling her that she could take time off was going to get her to take time off. So I just set the expectation, like, this is what I expect out of you. It's not much. Tell me what you need. We'll be here for you when you need it. The other part of that, and the other thing that kind of plays into the hard, is that when she called me and told me about this really horrible situation she was in, we're in the US, so obviously my first thought was like, oh my God, what are those medical bills going to be like? That's going to be awful for her. Like, how is this going to be financially draining to her? Is she going to need help? Is she going to need help in that arrangement? Whatever. And then I had this flashback moment to this decision that I made like 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago now, where I purchased insurance for our company, for everybody at our company that we pay 100% on. It was 3 times as expensive as what we were told to buy, basically, for our size and our income. And I just went, I can't have people deal with startup chaos and have shitty health insurance. I just can't do both. I can't be like, hey, by the way, you're going to be constantly pivoting and we're going to be changing our minds constantly and we're going to throw chaos at you all the time. But also, here's a $5,000 deductible. Like, I just couldn't do it. And so I spoke to a friend at the time and I said, I think I'm going to make the financially irresponsible decision and get the better health insurance. And we're going to pay for it 100% because I think that's what you should do for people when you're asking them to work in a stressful, chaotic environment. And at the time she said to me, and it's just like indelibly imprinted on my brain, doing the right thing for your people is never the irresponsible decision. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's true. But it has been hard every month to look at that bill and to know that I need X amount of money in the bank just to pay for health insurance coverage. Flash forward almost a year, actually just over a year. That's why we paid for the health insurance coverage, because everything she was going through is covered. All of her doctors were in network. Her out-of-pocket was very minimal compared to other people who have gone through the same therapies. And she didn't have to worry about a damn thing there. Now, I had been worrying, not just about her, but about paying that premium every month for the previous however long. And I went, oh, this is why we do it. This right here is why we do it. So that was like moment 1 of being like, oh, yeah, this is harder, but there's a reason that we do it. Then moment 2 was, I think she was 4 or 5 months in and I get a call from her. Again, not a person who calls me very often. And she said,
I have to tell you that I just left the doctor and all of the treatments are working. And the fact that I had immediate access to this care and I didn't have to go through all of the hoops of, finding somebody who's in network or whatever is probably why, because my treatment wasn't delayed, is probably why I'm having such fantastic response. And I've already been working full-time, but they returned me to work full-time effective immediately. And I just have to go for maintenance care like every 3 to 6 months.
and I was like, oh, that's why. Right there. That's why. Got it. Because this has been hard as fuck. But that's why. And then this is, again, not the reason that we do any of it, but last Christmas, I opened up the front door to my house to this giant box, and I'm like, what is this? And the note in it just basically said, like, I wouldn't have been able to get through the last year if you hadn't been so supportive. Thank you so much. And it had like just a bunch of like treats and tchotchkes and like there was a mug in there or like a plastic coffee cup that said chaos coordinator. And I was like, oh, that's me. That's what I do. That was not immediate, right? I didn't say, take the time, take as much time as you need, and then immediately get $1 million for being a nice person, right? Or like caring more about the employee than I did about the immediate coverage, right? We went through a whole ton of suck. And it wasn't her fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. But we went through a whole ton of suck to get there. But a human has her health because of it. In his case, it led to promotions and expansions and more hiring because he got through the suck. But that doesn't mean that it at any point is easy. It doesn't mean that we like wake up and we're immediately edified by our choices to be human first. In fact, you curse your own name a lot when you're like looking at the bank balance going like, why did I spend so much on my employees? This is awful. But you find out why. Life shows you why in lots of different ways. And in both his case and my case, life showed us why. His was a little faster, so I'm a little jealous about that. His took like 3 months, and he like had his why in front of him, and I had to go through like several more months of suck than that, but that's fine. It's fine. That means I am actually going to win the lottery faster than he is, because that's how karma works, right? It like builds up like Scrooge McDuck stacks of money based on what is owed to you to balance out the universe. That's how I'm going to imagine it anyway. So yes, it sucks. And doing the right thing is hard. It's hard a lot of the time. Doing the right things by humans is atrociously bad so often, and is still the thing to do. And you will figure out the why and when and how someday. That is probably not going to be tomorrow, though I would love for it to be tomorrow for you. And you just sometimes have to hold your breath and get through it. Don't hold your breath too long, because then I'll have to call the ambulance for you too. And when you do, you know. When you've gotten through it, when you see the results of it, you know, because it smacks you in the face and you're like, oh, there it is. But you can't, I don't know if people know this, I have a couple of control issues. And I want to control the shit out of these situations and go like grab my reward out of the money tree, because it would make things so much easier. But there is no tree. There is just time and universal balance, and you'll get there someday, but I can't tell you when. So sorry, not sorry, but also sorry. And now we'll go to Allison, who has this week's small talk.
All right. We have a question from Becca in Asheville, North Carolina. I keep replaying conversations in my head long after they're over, not just awkward ones, but normal ones too. Is that anxiety, rumination, or just my brain refusing to shut up? And how do you get it to stop at 2 a.m.?
As somebody who has done 1,000 million per trillion mental health intakes for new patients in my career, racing thoughts at 2 a.m. mean you should go talk to somebody. You should definitely go talk to somebody. That's a sign of a lot of things, but if that's the way you're feeling at 2 a.m., it might be time to talk to somebody. That said, I replay conversations in my head constantly. And I'm usually pretty good on my feet. I don't put my foot in my mouth that often. But there are still some aspects of the social experience that just totally were by me, despite the fact that I think I'm mostly good at it. But in hindsight, I'll be like, oh, I bet that person was trying to hedge at. I sense manipulation really fast. That gets my spidey senses tingling. But there are other more subtle things, like somebody who's asking for something without asking for it, who isn't necessarily being manipulative, but is being shy or bashful or is not fully communicating what they need, that I will totally miss. Also, I tend to take things at face value, maybe more than I should, a lot of times because I just don't want to do the work to figure out what the underlying thing is. Unless it's like, there's some people it's just like super apparent with, and I don't know if it's apparent to other people or I just like, it's my spidey sense. But I also tend to take things at face value and then like afterward go like, oh, maybe that person didn't actually intend to do that thing that they said they absolutely totally would do. And they were just being nice. And now I'm replaying it going, this person probably thinks I'm a giant donkus because I totally believed that they were going to do the thing they said they were going to do. And they had no intention of it. However, I don't know if we ever stop torturing ourselves about like the way that happened. I do think as you get older, you care less. Like, I had to make a choice at some point that if somebody wasn't going to tell me what they actually wanted and was going to just hope that I got what they were hedging at, then like, that's probably not a person I'm going to communicate with well. And so that takes a lot of the pressure off me to try to read all this subtext that may or may not be there. I think in general, you have to take people by what they say. Assume that what they said is correct unless they tell you otherwise. Don't agree to things, promise things, engage with things that are bad for you or detrimental toward you just because someone wants you to. And hope that if it went poorly or you didn't actually understand each other, that they're a cool enough person that they will reach out and you'll get another shot. That won't happen all the time. It won't happen most of the time. But you do, as you get older, you do get to a point where you're like, I do not have the energy to dissect this thing 700,000 times. If somebody needs something or wants something from me, they'll tell me. And it also is a decision that you can make. Like, if this person isn't comfortable enough or doesn't want to have a conversation with me about how something went poorly, then that's probably not a person I want in my universe. Or maybe that's a person I'm going to keep at arm's length instead of having right next to me. But if the dissecting things in the middle of the night is actually keeping you from sleeping, that's actually a different conversation. And one that you should talk to a clinician about, because that could actually be a thing. Thanks for being here, guys. Have a good day. Love you, mean it. Oh my God. That was way longer than I meant it to be. That was supposed to be like a 5-minute one. Oh well.